Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy.
You prepared?
Mhm.
So our murdering piece of trash is Alonzo Robinson.
Okay.
Did you sneeze?
I said, yeah.
Oh. Okay. So he wreaks his havoc. He wreaks his havoc during the 1920s in Mississippi, Michigan, and Indiana.
Was it during the 70s?
I just said the 20s. Clean out your ear holes. Like I
It's
literally
clogged.
just said, he wreaks havoc during the 1920s.
I wasn't listening. I was writing his name down for my editing purposes.
I didn't even finish that sentence. You're like, was it in the 70s? But the 20s. He wreaks his havoc in Mississippi, Michigan, and Indiana, where he does his grave robbing, flesh eating, and obscene letter writing, and serial killings.
Hopefully he's not having people over for a dinner party.
So, not a lot's known about Alonzo's upbringing. So any contributing factors that turned him into a monster are a question mark. So in terms of your head injuries, your close family relative doing some diddling or some beating or some starvation dieting, I don't know. No.
We'll just go ahead and assume that there's some head injuries in there. I feel like it's a safe bet.
Now, it is said that he grew up on the wrong side of the tracks of Cleveland, Mississippi, to a poor family. Now, he's not arrested until he's 23 years old in 1918, when a series of obscene letters were sent to a local woman and traced back to him. Now, mind you, during this time, obscene letter writings were considered a serious offense, but will pale in comparison to what he's about to do.
How were they traced back to him? Did he put a return address on there? Because that would be amazing.
I don't know. I feel like penmanship and a postmark, they're like, man, Alonzo wrote this one. Look, he wrote his E backwards again.
Did he sign it?
But whatever he wrote to that lady, she sure didn't appreciate it.
I bet he said he wanted to put it in her butt.
I don't know if that was a thing in the 1918s. But so when the police officers go to arrest Alonzo for his said obscene letter writing, he ends up getting shot in the shoulder when he tries to run away. I mean, he does manage to escape. But I was like, holy shit, when they said that was against the law and a serious offense, I didn't think you could get shot for obscene letter writing.
The hell did he write?
Again, I don't know if he doodled pictures along with it, but I was just like, that seems a little extreme. We're here about some letters you wrote. Pow, pow! That'll teach him.
Yeah, that's a bit scary.
Check that off the list, Cletus. So after getting shot, Alonzo will lay low for 8 years. I don't know.
Because he was healing.
I was going to say, I don't know what he did in those 8 years, but
he was healing from that there infection from being shot.
Physical therapy, his rotary cuff.
He needed to get his writing utensils back in that hand. He needed his arm working.
He lost dexterity in his hand for those 8 years until he could grip a pencil.
I wasn't thinking it was his pencil. How you think he's sealing them letters?
That is disgusting, Andrea.
He wasn't using wax.
I totally just pictured those little roll-on adhesive things, only it isn't. Okay, anyway. Shut up, Andrea. So when police in Ferndale, Michigan, are stumped by a crime spree, apparently there's headless ladies' bodies are turning up all over town.
Way to segue into that, jeez.
Well, this is 8 years later, and we fast forward to police are being stumped in Ferndale, Michigan.
Because they shot him. So he's like, rather than just write the letters, I'm going to take their skulls.
Are you having a moment? We were in Mississippi when he got shot. 8 years later, he finds himself in Michigan. Or I should say, we're fast forwarding 8 years, and the police are stumped by a crime spree where these headless lady bodies are turning up all over town. 4, by the time they are led to a man who's calling himself James Coiner, by the way, also Alonzo Robinson. But they don't know that. Now Alonzo gets wind that they're onto him, or his alias rather, and scurries out of town by the time the cops come to his house to question him. So they don't ever see Alonzo. They just know, like, all their little going around towns investigating strange things that leads them to the James Coiner guy. Got it?
Got it.
So Alonzo gets wind, he scurries off. Naturally, the cops are confident they found their guy, because if you're starting to have all your leads point in one direction and that person disappears, it looks real bad. They go to the James Coiner guy's house, and they find the ladies' missing heads in the house.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So these Michigan detectives track Alonzo to Indiana, where he was arrested for grave robbing and stealing a gal's corpse.
Okay, but if he's stealing corpses, that's way different than murder.
So that's what I initially, when I started doing this one, I was like, so if he's just doing weird things to, I mean, it's still disgusting, but that's obviously not as bad as if he creates his own corpses.
Yeah.
But
granted, I would hate for him to dig up our family member and have his way with whatever he's doing. Why is he keeping their heads? You know what?
Don't ask. I don't know what extracurriculars, if he's sealing his envelopes with his dick juices, Andrea. Not that he was, we don't know that. But I don't know what he was doing with their heads. But he gets 8 years of jail time for that. So when the Michigan detectives go to question him, Alonzo does the whole, "That wasn't me," as James Coiner. And I don't know anything that happened in Ferndale, Michigan. He even tells police, "I could tell you a lot of things you'd like to know. A lot of things about murders and murderers. But I'll die first."
Seeing as how he got shot for writing letters, it is very well. That's
He might
a real possibility.
Interrogating, because I feel like they were armed. So the police don't have evidence to support a murder charge. So they go back home because it's 23, 30, somewhere around there.
It's kind of impressive that he could write letters.
Well, that is a good point, because if it was a low-income area that he grew up in anyhow, obscene letter writing, I don't know. They might not have been super detailed. They could have been elementary school level, and he sent ladies a bunch of penis pictures.
I was going to say, I wonder if it was illustrations.
Like a silhouette.
Well, but you know what I mean? Like, the amount of trouble he's already gotten in so far, it's fairly impressive. Because reading was like a luxury back then. So
again, I didn't say they were. So I did want to find the letters because I was curious about what was in them. Especially
wink, wink.
Shut up.
That's the reason why.
So
Dave, write your wife a dirty letter. She done wants to read some pervy stuff.
Dude, he got shot over it. Like, did he sprinkle pubes in there too? Like, I feel like
he manscaped into the envelope, so it's like confetti of hair.
Or what's the other side of this? How bored were they in Mississippi that they had to go run down some pervert? But anyway, that brings us to July 1934, when Alonzo is paroled and decides it's probably not a good idea to go back to his alias James Coiner. But
why not?
And because that guy they're looking for to pin murder charges to. Which, by the way,
I said probably not.
Oh, I thought you said why not. Well, that's why I was like, are you not listening at all today? And it turns out I wasn't listening.
Sure weren't.
But he heads home to Cleveland, Mississippi instead, and decides to go back to his obscene letter writing. You figure he gave it up for 16 years and he missed it.
Because he got shot. Telling you, he's working on that dexterity of that hand.
Turns out 8 years in prison, he got familiar with his hand again.
Sure did.
One of his dirty letters is sent to an Indianapolis woman who turns it over to police. Now, federal investigators manage to find a clue in the dirty letter that leads them to the dirty letter writer. Now, the lady that Alonzo chose to write the letter to had been in the Indianapolis Times with her name misspelled. So she was in an article. Now, the obscene letter writer had used the same misspelling that was posted in the Indianapolis Times, and it also had a postmark of Marigold, Mississippi on the envelope. So the agents began searching their subscribers list in effort to catch their pornographer, which I had to pause.
What?
I had to pause there because I was like, I thought it was obscene letter writing that was the issue. Now they've
It was
turned them
for
into
sure illustrations.
pictures. I was like, whoa. I didn't think obscene letters made you a pornographer, but I guess literotica. So reading the whole they switched him from a obscene letter writer to a pornographer made me put a pin in my research and shift gears, because then it made me curious. Okay, so they said it was a serious offense for obscene letter writing, but how serious
get
are
shot.
we? How serious are we talking? So
Shot worthy. You get shot. I don't feel like it gets much more serious than that.
It made me want to investigate when all that started. It wanted me to I wanted to figure out where it all started with, which led me to the parent law of all this is the Comstock Law, which was passed in March 1873. I know you don't like your history lessons, Andrew, but it's interesting. Did you just... So this law, I'm just going to talk. You snore away, jackass. But you're missing an interesting anecdote for your dinner parties. But that law that was passed in 1873 made it a crime punishable up to 5 years hard labor to use the U.S. postal system to send obscenity, contraceptives, abortion tools, sex toys, or personal letters with any sexual content.
Now, it also made it possible to be shot.
Well, apparently they can shoot people for evading. Now, with the establishment of the railroad, an amendment was later passed to include the railroad cannot be included to traffic obscene things. Now, I thought it was crazy.
Wait. How do they know what's in the letters?
So I thought, it's funny you should mention that. I figured that when they did packages, they didn't so much have cardboard boxes as much as they would wrap things in the brown paper or a cloth or whatever and tie a string around it. So I feel like there were phallic shaped things going through the mail, and maybe one pierced it or somehow it fell untied, and somebody's like, somebody just mailed somebody else a wooden whittled dildo, which, by the way, sounds like a horrible idea. I just think splinters. But
how?
That's where my head went with, that's why they opened the mail, or it accidentally opened up because of some rough handlings, or I don't know, stagecoach kind of thing, and something fell off, and they were like, what is that? I don't know.
They're like, this is oddly shaped. We're going to go ahead and open these.
This clearly and they open it up. Only meant for insert. What?
You done shut me up real quick on that one. You dirty little pervert. Dave, write your letters to your wife. She needs some attention.
But do not, and I repeat, do not whittle a penis. That is not recommended unless it's for art, not for use.
So apparently she wants to read about penises, and she also wants to stare at them.
So I'll have you know, locally, there is a museum around here that has a whole lot of penises in there. And I'm talking mosaic artwork. It's weird. I'm just going to say, there are people out there who like to gaze, do whatever. They like their eyeballs to fall on some phallic things.
A penis is not exactly pretty.
Anyway.
I'm just saying, it ain't pretty.
Do it with the lights off. You really, I find it hard to believe, Andrea.
I didn't say they don't feel good. I said they ain't pretty. I don't want to wander a museum and stare at them.
So we're getting way off topic. Now, back to the railroad being, you can't use that to traffic your obscenities.
So wait, on a serious note,
what?
Don't you sigh at me. I have a serious question. Fuck you. So you said that it also said anything for abortions. Well, not to be grotesque here, but back in the day, didn't they use like metal coat hangers and stuff? Like how
So,
can they determine
Andrea, I don't know
it?
the date of a metal clothes hanger, but I'm gonna go out there and say in 1873 they didn't have metal clothes hangers.
You make me Google when they came out with clothes hangers, metal clothes hangers.
It wasn't in 1873. That
But
wasn't even around the time of sliced bread.
I'm just saying, it's like, with the exception of medical devices, how did they know what people, you know what I mean? Like who
So
determines what was
I'm
considered
getting there.
inappropriate?
I do
Oh,
not know, but I'm going to tell you, it wasn't until 1965, which by the way, thought that was pretty late, but it wasn't until 1965 that the restrictions on birth control were removed. And during its early stages, even some anatomy books were forbidden from being sent to medical students, which blew my mind. And I was like, that's why surgery was so dangerous. They didn't even have the textbooks, so they were just willy-nilly trying to figure things out. They're like, we don't know where to cut. This looks like a good place to start. Nope, go higher.
sounds like you didn't want to have any type of medical practicing on you because they were truly practicing, which, by the way, I just Googled it and it says today's coat hanger was inspired by a coat hook that was invented in 1869 by O.A. North of New Britain, Connecticut.
Fine,
So,
Andrea. Then in 1873, you couldn't mail a hanger because it was abortion artifacts.
no, but my question was like, how do they determine whether or not somebody's mailing something inappropriate? You know what I mean? Like, did it
So, like I
require somebody
said,
ratting them out?
there was probably that because they're probably some sort of advantage to anybody who tattled. They probably, like the wanted posters. Like, if you've got information, go on and tell us. We'll give you a whole penny. And you will not go to hell because you turned them in. Is to rat out your pornographic neighbor.
So people are going around peeking in the windows?
Probably so. There wasn't a whole lot of entertainment back then. But
apparently there was. Just opening the mail was entertaining.
Apparently watching the mail come and go, because again, I feel like these were all just things that were wrapped with brown paper. So it was like, I know what that is.
Turns out Susie Q just done ordered her some cucumbers and carrots through the mail.
Andrea, they didn't get fruits and vegetables through the mail.
You don't know.
I do know. The mail took forever to get to them.
Maybe it was the next door neighbor.
They might
just wanted to get her in trouble.
Anyway. So now this all started with a Mr. Anthony Comstock. He was the U.S. Postal Inspector and started a campaign against saloons in New York. What got Anthony all jaded was the death of his friend. Now, he blamed the death of his friend on the saloons for leading him astray and corrupting him with disease and ruining his train of thought. Now, Anthony also laid his friend's death at the feet of Charles Conroy, who sold his friend erotic material from out of his basement.
Again, I say ew.
Which I was like, oh my God, they were peddling porn out of their basements.
That's disgusting. It's right up there with the illegal alcohol.
Yeah. You want some moonshine?
Come get your alcohol and your porn.
Or some spank bank material.
Just make sure that you're not catching all of it in the same barrel.
Oh, gross. It leaves, like, it makes me think of that
American Pie
out there.
Stifler.
No. Ew. No. I was thinking of when people say skimming off the top. I know that is not what they're talking about, but you might want to skim the top for a different reason if your moonshine gets mixed. It's a two bucket. But so
it's a disgusting ADD case if I've ever heard one in my life.
It really is.
It's your fault.
Stay focused.
You dirty pervert.
I know, because anything related to penises and masturbation, apparently. Now, Anthony...
It's y'all excited.
God dang it, Andrea! This was just supposed to be a side note, and it's turning into its own case. Anthony had a particular anxiety in regards to male masturbation. He did worry for the virtue of women, but his biggest fear was that men and boys... Now, and it's a new environment, a media being inexpensive to print with the whole printing press thing. So he feared that men and boys would fall prey to the secret vice of masturbation, since now they had some reading material with pictures, and they would lose themselves, their souls, minds, and body into their masturbating activities.
But his friend lost his mind, body, and soul to that there saloon.
But he feels like doing the whole masturbating thing is like the gateway to that. So once you learn to play with it, then you want others to play with it. And then you want to play with theirs too. So yeah, so when I told Dave that one, he was like, there is a point. I mean, he went a little far with it, but if you go down the wrong path, and he just figured the wrong path started with beating it. He would actually write about, like, he would publish little pamphlets and everything because he was trying to spread the word to save the youths. But Anthony would write about the direct line from sexual images causing the arousal of animal lust, causing a breakdown of self-discipline, habitual masturbation, and crippling guilt and shame, and ultimately self-destruction, which again seems like a huge leap. But
when you say animal lust, you're not talking bestiality, I hope, because that takes us into a hard...
He's talking about like the animalistic.
Okay, just verifying.
Internal, yes. He wasn't talking about we have an issue with Fido now. Don't trust your teens. But Anthony would develop a hate for his own youthful shame resulting from his childhood weaknesses, he would call it, but thought that the shame he felt was deserved and should be used as a deterrent for the crime of self-abuse.
He was beating it real hard of his abuse.
Well, he might have
needed some
blisters.
Neosporin.
Now, delving into the world of vices was both a moral weakness and a path to personal failure, according to Anthony. Now, he thought it should never be acceptable. So Anthony went on his personal crusade throughout his neighborhood and kept a ledger of every arrest he made. It had to made him not invited to a lot of the parties.
Okay.
Now, I know we're already on a side note, but side note, even now, postal inspectors carry firearms, can make arrests, execute federal search warrants, and serve subpoenas, which I thought was pretty interesting. Didn't know that. Now you do.
Can I just say that their Alabama postal people need to go do some investigating of your postal worker, because I've tried to send you packages that have been opened, retaped with postal tape, and half of the products were missing.
Well, that umbrella hat, it might have looked like a phallic-shaped symbol in it. Like, this ain't right. It's just an umbrella. We'll keep that. Send her the plastic.
Yeah. So I obnoxiously sent Claire a umbrella hat because she said it was real hot when she mows. So I sent her one of them, their big umbrella hats. All she got was an empty plastic bag with a Post-it note saying there was no product.
I don't know why the plastic arrived to me. It seemed like they could have saved the time. But
well, and then you've got Christmas presents that I sent to you and Dave. That box was sliced open on the side, retaped shut, and half the shit in it was missing.
Yeah. Well,
so now anyway, I have a collection of crap to drive down to you. Turns out I can't mail it through Amazon. I can't send it through the postal service. None of it was phallic shaped, except maybe that their umbrella.
Now, Anthony will continue on his mission while claiming he wanted to be a law-abiding citizen and a good Christian. I thought it was interesting that they could make arrests and execute federal search warrants.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Now, soon Anthony partners up with the YMCA, and they fund his campaign that leads to him running an association to help fight the suppression of vice and eventually get the Comstock laws accepted by Congress in 1870.
That's because, and you're not going to convince me otherwise, that all these men in Congress, when he's approaching them and he's like, do you think that masturbation and self-pleasure and self-abuse should be allowed? Do you think, what are these men going to say? Yes, I feel like it's acceptable. No, they're going to be like, yeah, that's wrong. That's dirty. Let's pass those laws, even though they're secretly going home and open up their spank bank of the illegal pornography that they got out of the other dude's basement. And they're just like,
I feel like they're You with the sound effects. And I feel like the politicians are probably backdooring it into the saloon because they also need about the antibiotics. Because when they
Right?
hear about his friend's death, they're probably like, "What? Which
You
one
said
was
that
it?"
came from Cheryl? What?
Like, fuck me. Now I have to convince my wife these are special vitamins she needs to take.
No, they're like, they'll blame it on her.
Yeah, probably.
You done cheated, woman.
Well, they probably don't have to explain an STD. Because you know how,
No.
like, back in the day, I mean, you figure even in childbirth, if the woman wasn't really consulted on her own physical health, it was to her husband that she wouldn't even know what she's being treated for.
That's true.
Also, side note,
Oh,
numerous
Jesus.
numerous doctors would be arrested and end up convicted for supplying written materials explaining pregnancy and how to prevent it.
How did babies get made? If everybody
Andrea,
was so.
if you haven't
I'm not
learned this
asking.
by now,
That's why I done got me 6 kids. No, but
you
seriously,
don't
if
know.
everybody was.
You just thought
If
you
every.
tripped and failed.
Hey, dumbass. What I'm saying is if they were so squirrely and prudish, how did they get past the whole getting naked and making a baby thing if they're so like, oh, that's so inappropriate?
So it was okay for you to be dirty when you were married. I guess for the single folk, you shouldn't be doing anything. But anywho, which kind of leads to the whole some people not understanding the connection of where babies come from. There
Mhm.
probably were
Fuck
those
you.
people.
Fuck you. Because I said that originally and you done made me sound like a jackass, you fucker.
That's why I was legitimizing your thing there. That they probably, because that one case, remember when the one girl gets raped and then she didn't realize she could be pregnant? If you haven't listened to it,
It's called a piece of soap.
yeah, I was having a brain fart of what we named it. But yeah, it's a piece of soap. But when she gets
Said a
raped,
piece of shit.
but doesn't
Yeah.
realize, since she was a virgin, that she doesn't realize that she'd be pregnant or that there was a threat of or a chance of that
Yeah.
situation there, that they didn't understand it because the knowledge was being restricted. And if you make it so doctors can't even discuss it,
Wait, they can't even discuss it?
I don't know, Andrew. I would assume that it's like a taboo thing because they don't want people to be just sleeping around. Obviously, if you get married, the goal was to crank them out. Now, back to our original case, our segue took longer than I had pinned in. So while the federal investigators are looking for their pervert letter writer, Alonzo decides
I done forgot about him.
He decides he's bored with that and goes back to his murderous ways, which I kind of wrote loosely because we really don't know that he was murdering them. And I feel like that's why the Michigan detectives left him anyway, because how do you prove if he's in jail for grave robbing or corpse grave robbing? I don't know if it's the same shit. You're robbing the corpse of its grave. I feel like that's why they also left, because how do you prove that one in the 19 somethings?
There weren't missing women.
Well, it could have been like transient people. If they were naked, how do you identify them without their head? The other early cases in the 1920s and 30s, they would do like, if they found a body, they do like a public viewing to help identify them. I don't feel like that'd help.
No,
Whose
because
neck does this look like? We
yeah,
realize the
whose
whole thing's not
fingers?
here. But like,
Because they're gonna clothe the rest of the body. Because since they're all a bunch of prudes,
well,
then
you don't even know the fingers or anything like that. Because if there's a hole in the neck, it's possible the bugs went in there, and I don't know how much there was left of the body.
gross.
Alonzo was planning on breaking into a doctor's office when he catches a man that's walking home late from work and decides to go over to his house instead. Looks more interesting, I guess. Now, it's Mr. Aurelius Turner, known as Buddy to his family and friends, who was just getting home to his children and his pregnant wife, Luella. Now, Alonzo knocks on the door. It's on the later evening side of things, so it's dark out, just so you know. He knocks on the door of the Turner's home. Buddy answers the door, but somehow he gets a feeling that this feller's not a friendly one. So I don't know if it's a facial expression or anything, but he sees that the feller's up to no good and goes for his gun. Now, Alonzo, I know. Now, Alonzo, probably a little bit of PTSD from being shot, grabs the gun from him and shoots Buddy in the head and then starts beating him with a hammer. I assume he brought the hammer with him, just so you know.
I have a lot of questions.
Good.
Well, since
How
you said you're
many could there
assuming,
possibly be?
how did he? Okay, since you said you're assuming he brought the hammer, I'm just going to say he didn't, just because.
I'm gonna say
How
he
does somebody
did
look
because
suspicious?
he was. Oh my goodness, Andrea! So many questions or so many replies back, and you haven't even said a whole lot. So I'm gonna say he brought the hammer with him because he was planning to break into a doctor's office. My guess would be he'd break the glass and then let himself in, kind of scenario, or pry the door open.
Okay. But if he knocked on somebody's door, unless he used the hammer to whack on the door,
He could have had it in his trench coat.
I just totally pictured him naked in a trench coat with a hammer. Sorry.
You don't know.
I don't know, but that's where my brain just went. It was not a good turn.
And he could have called it the hammer. But in terms of how do you know somebody's not up to no good, go into some shady parts of town, Andrea, and look around. You can tell by the way somebody's like doing the shifty-eyed, wily coyote looks that they're up to no good. And I would say if it's the later part of the evening, you shouldn't have people coming by your house unless it's the policeman with some news, or if you're expecting somebody. And if you open the door and it looks like somebody who looks a bit crazed, is by himself, doesn't say anything, I would say anybody else, I would arm yourself, especially if you already made the fatal error of opening the door.
So my advice to anybody is don't go knocking on Claire's door. She's answering the door with a gun after that there dark.
I feel like if you show up in the wee hours of the morning or in the late hours of the evening when it's beyond the normal respectable calling times, then you get what you get.
Okay. So anyway, Alonzo's done brought a hammer to a gunfight.
But he won.
Ooh, shit.
So at this point, 8 months pregnant Luella is screaming because she hears the commotion, and she naturally, by the time she gets there, her husband is shot and brains splattered everywhere because he went at him with a hammer.
Gross.
Now, Alonzo breaks out his hammer again and repeatedly strikes Luella in the head. Now, her brains get dashed everywhere as well. At some point, he switches to a knife that he also has and switches to stabbing her. Alonzo then moves her body on the bed alongside with Buddy and proceeds to mutilate Luella's body.
When you say mutilate, what does that entail?
You know, I like surprises. Now, Buddy, he leaves alone on the bed next to Luella, but he cuts a star shape out of her flesh from Luella's thigh, carves out her unborn child, and hacks off other chunks of flesh from her corpse.
Ugh.
Chunks, by the way, he takes with him. He also lays the baby next to her. Now, Buddy is 36 years old, and Luella is 34 at the times of their death. Also in the home were the Turners' 2 young children. Like during all the commotion, little Aurelius Jr. gets up to see what's going on, and Alonzo smacks the boy in the head with the hammer.
Oh, gosh.
He's just 6 years old.
Poor baby.
The other child that was in the home, he was just 2 and was asleep. Alonzo leaves him alone. Now, fortunately, there was a third child of the Turners, but she was at a sleepover, so she didn't have to endure any of that.
He didn't take the mom's head, did he?
No. That's how he
good.
leaves the things with them laying on the bed, and pretty horrific. Now, it would be 6 to 8 hours later when the maid comes in around 7 a.m. and when she finds this horrific scene. Now, I know that was a lot of information to give you, but you remember the lady in Indianapolis that turned in her obscene letters to the authorities? The one
She was the maid.
No. So the one that had the postmarked letter from Marigold, Mississippi, the misspelling, and the Indianapolis Time. Yes?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, well, the postal inspector in Memphis checked with the Indianapolis Times to see how many subscribers they had in Marigold, Mississippi. Fortunately, there's only one subscriber, an old black woman who happened to be Alonzo's mom, and who he lived with.
Oh, shit. Wait, wasn't that years prior, though? Why they're just now investigating it?
Andrew, things don't happen quickly. I already told you the mail took a while.
That's years. Way to go, snail mail.
So I imagine they had to write off to the Indianapolis Times, or even if they called, I imagine they had to do a lot of digging, and it wasn't anyone there's priority either. So, because they can't talk about an open case to give anybody motivation, I'm sure. So it's just like,
Realistically, they were like, this was a prude complaining about a dirty picture because it
so
wasn't a letter. It
yeah,
wasn't a goddamn letter. It was a dirty picture.
he laid his penis on the paper and stenciled it. Really, they have no way to prove that he wasn't just sending out mushroom pictures.
Oh, God. You're assuming he was circumcised.
Oh, gross. Fine. Stump pictures.
I totally just pictured like the sandworm from Beetlejuice.
Ew.
I don't know why. Anyway, continue.
So they track Alonzo down to the post office where he gets his mail out of and where also he sends his dirty letters from. Now, in walks Alonzo one day at the post office to fetch his mail, and the sheriff asks him for the time. Now, Alonzo pulls out Buddy's watch that he had taken from him.
Jeez.
A watch, by the way, that was inscribed on it to Aurelius Turner from Papa. It was given to Buddy as a high school graduation gift, so there's absolutely no denying that that is not a watch that was Alonzo's.
But Alonzo Dunn didn't know how to read, so he thought it was just the brand of the watch. He didn't know that it was evidence that could be used against him.
He thought it was the maker's mark.
And when the policeman asked him what time it was, he couldn't tell that time neither. He just opened that there pocket watch and turned around and said, "Here, have yourself a gander."
He probably did. He's like, I just carry this for balance. Now, Alonzo
makes me look smart.
Now, the sheriff must not play poker too well because he must have made a face or something, because Alonzo realizes he's been made and goes for his gun. At the same time, the policeman overpowers him and they capture Alonzo. Now, when they search Alonzo, they find a .38 revolver, a bunch more dirty letters that he was about to mail out, swatches of human hair, a strip of human flesh that had been salted, cured like beef jerky, and had a bite taken out of it.
Oh, gross.
I know that's a lot for you to digest.
Ha, ha, ha.
However, when they said he had a bunch more letters to mail out, so far it seems like only 2 ladies had turned them in, so it sounds like he had some subscribers of his own that liked his letters, or his pictures, rather.
Where did he get? I know he got the one lady from the newspaper, but where is he getting their addresses from?
I do not know. But when they said he had a bunch of letters, I was like, huh. I wonder if he was deciding to like cast a wider net. Anyway, so it's not long before Alonzo confesses to murdering Mr. and Mrs. Turner and also admit to keeping the heads of the women in Michigan. Now, he will confess to beating the life out of Miss Turner, but he insists that the ones in Michigan were corpses he dug up and kept their heads rather than murder victims. And as much as they like to call Alonzo a serial killer, I believe he only killed 2 people. Well, 3 as the baby, but I believe him, even if they don't, but they weren't willing to believe that one, but he insists, so that's what he did.
I believe him. He started off with his filthy hobby of grave robbing. Well, I guess he technically started with his dirty letters. And then he must have been drawing pictures of skull fuckings or something and then decided to give that a whirl.
And I feel like he kept 4 for every shade of hair. He liked all the ladies.
He didn't want to pick and choose. He had different times that he wanted a different shade. Either that or as their flesh and everything rotted, it just didn't feel the same. Felt kind of teethy.
Like, this one feels like it might be moving. You got the maggot reference then.
Yeah, I sure did.
Okay, so Alonzo had a 1-day trial. Now, there would
What?
I know, I laughed during some of this.
1 day?
I love the earlier years because the way they did things, it sure was swift.
It sure was. But how can they... Okay, whatever. Continue.
Pantyhose, lady. So he had a 1-day trial. Now, there'd be 200 guardsmen that would surround the courthouse. Now, they would also have sandbags and barbed wire entanglements that encompassed the building to ensure the peace was kept, because obviously people were super upset to find out what he did to the Turners and that the baby being carved out. Like, I don't feel like secrets were kept So
So
mob
you
rule and
mentioned,
everything is what they're trying to maintain the
now,
peace.
I feel like it could be slightly race. Where
Yes.
did you say this? He finally is captured
Mississippi.
in Mississippi, right?
Yep.
And you said that his mom was black, so therefore I'm assuming he's black. Were the
Yep.
Turners white?
I don't know.
If it was an assault on a white family, if Buddy answered the door and saw a black man in the evening standing at his door, that would be why he grabbed his gun, which
Yeah.
I realized.
The racist
I,
folks in Mississippi.
yep. And I realized that Alonzo was there to do bad things. So it was pretty spot
Yeah.
on. But I feel like the all of the extra security would be if this is racially,
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say racially motivated, but I could see the whole
revenge wise.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That a white mob wanting to lynch a black man in the South is logical for the times.
Which, again, what he did was super messed up, but
No,
the level of security they needed to go along with his 1-day trial, like, what? Anyway, continue.
Yeah, well, regardless, there's the entanglements around the building to keep ensure the peace was kept. Other soldiers marched the streets with guns. I feel like that was also the motivation to have a speedy trial, because the sooner they got a conviction, they'd be done with this situation. Now, after his 1-day trial, he was found guilty. The jury had deliberated for 5 minutes.
Was it an all-white jury? I'm going to say yes.
I believe at that time it was only a white jury.
Yeah.
You're talking still segregation times.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he was hung on March 5th, 1935. Now, Julius attended the hanging. He was a family member of the Turners. And he said Alonzo laughed the whole time. Which I feel like, okay, the fact that he was grave robbing and decapitating people, I feel like he wasn't screwed too tight anyway, which would make sense if he had some sort of mental issue.
Yeah, yikes.
Which means, had he done the same things nowadays, he probably would not have had the death penalty, because he'd had some sort of mental hiccup that would make it illegal to commit him, or not commit him, but
execute.
To put him down.
We keep the crazy ones alive.
Yeah, for studying.
For poking.
Now the Turner children, if you were curious, all lived, and they were
Did the 6-year-old become a serial killer with that there head injury?
He did not. Actually, they lived nice long lives. I mean, good. I'm sad for them that they lost their parents and a younger sibling, but they did live. If you were curious, and they were split up amongst family members, so I feel bad that one too. Well, I feel bad for the 6-year-old, because it had to have been devastating. He lost his whole family in a night, and I realize the family was probably somewhat local anyway, but they were pieced out, so everything
and the daughter
in a night.
Yeah, but the daughter who's older, who's at a friend's house or wherever she was.
Oh yeah. Well, the 6-year-old got hit in the head with a hammer, and he saw everything. And he woke up before the maid came, but what was he supposed to do?
Yeah, that's horrible.
And to see the horror of his baby sister or brother torn out of his mother.
Yeah, that's pretty disgusting. Poor baby.
Now, I did find their obituaries, and then I also found where, like, how on Ancestry.com you can leave notes and stuff. I did see on one of the obituaries for the Turners that the little boy, the 6-year-old, he had made a note in like 2010 or something that his dad, or not the little boy, but his dad had told him about that, because his dad was the 6-year-old, and said that the guy was like or he just remembered a giant hitting him. And obviously, if you're 6, everybody's real big. But Alonzo was like 6'5" or something. I'll have to send you the picture of him, because even when he's being walked into the courthouse, he towers over the police officers.
Goodness.
So I think that's a legitimate memory piece. But I also know you can't believe everything on the internet, so it's possible somebody was just wanting attention and wrote a little note and said that they were the grandchild of the Turners.
Yeah. Take it with a grain of salt.
But
Interesting if it is.
Well, I feel like for a 6-year-old, they would remember that. I mean, if somebody hit me in the head as a 6-year-old, I feel like I remember. And
I feel like I'd forget. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.